the separation of church and state, a premise not found in the Constitution or in the Declaration of Independence. It's referred to in the writings of Thomas Jefferson and has been given a level of authority beyond that of the Bible. It's now a high wall designed to keep God in a box while we as a nation do whatever we please. So what's the inevitable outcome? Stay with us. From the Moody Church in Chicago, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. As America begins a new era in Washington, Erwin Lutzer comes now with part 2 of his crucial analysis of a simple question. Is God on America's side?
You know, I just have to say this. As many of you know, I was born in Canada and was a Canadian citizen living here for 35 years in the United States with a green card. And 2 years ago, I became an American citizen. And I'm so glad that I can say I'm an American citizen. I love to say, my fellow Americans. I'll tell you this. Complain all that you want about the United States. With all of our problems, I wouldn't trade the United States of America for any other country in the world. But the question before us today is simple but complex. Is God on America's side? Is God on America's side? Part 2, because last year I preached on part 1. Is God on America's side? All of us know that God has been officially banned in America from the public square. He's been banned from government, he's been banned from education, he's been banned from science, and he's being banned from the workplace. And people are saying that God must stay on the other side of that thick, high wall called the separation of church and state. But we all know that after 9/11, God was allowed off the reservation and, at least for a brief time, was allowed to come back into public life. God Bless America signs were everywhere, including porn shops. Everyone was saying it is time for God to bless America. What Americans didn't realize at that time, and what they must realize again, is this, that I'm going to give you 3 propositions from the Scripture, and then I'm going to give us 5 mandates today. But first of all, number 1, as I emphasized even in the last message, God can both bless a nation and curse a nation. Deuteronomy chapter 11, the Lord through Moses says, "Behold, I have laid before you blessings and cursings. You choose blessing and you obey me and you will be blessed. You disobey me and you will be cursed, because I can do both to nations." Jeremiah Wright, whose rantings we all heard on television, was wrong in saying that we should say, "God damn America." But in this sense, he was right, namely that sometimes God does indeed judge nations, and he is presently judging us, as we shall learn in just a moment. When most Americans say God bless America, they're talking about the cultural God that we have. The God of capitalism, the God of political strength, the God of freedom. Most people mean, "Oh God, please keep us from terrorist attacks. Please keep my children healthy. And above all, don't let the stock market fall any further." That's what they mean when they say, "God bless America." But will you remember that God can not only bless a nation, but he can also curse a nation? Second proposition is simply this, that God's judgment takes different forms. It takes different forms. You know that a person asked me one time, "Do you believe that God is going to judge the United States of America?" I smiled. Is God going to judge the United States of America? He was thinking of some cataclysmic event in the future. Of course God is going to judge America. Right now we are under judgment. And that's because of the natural consequences of our sin. For example, the Bible teaches that sometimes God uses outside powers to judge us, as he did in 9/11. And by the way, we've just come from Europe, and Europe is terrified because of radical Islam. It may well be that most Muslims would like to live in peace, but unfortunately that's small comfort because it's the radicals that determine the agenda. And God could use radical Islam to judge Europe, which has largely turned its back on God, and that may be our judgment in our future too. God sometimes uses outside powers. But the most normal form of judgment is just the natural consequences of sin. For example, in Deuteronomy 28, God said to Israel, if you turn from me and disobey me, I'm going to have your families are going to be smashed during this time of tribulation, during what is called the captivities. There's going to be famine in the land, and there's some very gruesome things in that chapter that I will not mention. God says the destruction of families, that's a judgment. And here in America, we have accepted divorce, we have accepted immorality, and tonight 20 million children will go to bed with only one parent. And the devastation that is going to bring in the next generation when they marry and have no role models, it continues to increase like a snowball. Somebody told me recently that $10 billion is going to be spent in the next several years, I forget the number of years, just over all of the teenage pregnancies, where you have young women who are pregnant today who brag about it because of the immorality in our schools. All of that is a part of the judgment. You sin and you reap what you sow, and the judgment begins to boomerang. You also have such things as the knowledge of God is eclipsed. One of the most terrifying things in Deuteronomy 28 is this. God said, Israel, when you turn from me, your children are going to serve other gods. So today we have the proliferation of the New Age movement. You have occultism that we've spoken about in other messages. And people are dashing about looking for some other god. And your children will worship other gods. That is a judgment of God when we turn from the truth.